for it.
So I'm going to call the web service directly, or call the AJAX function, which calls the web service, and let my callback be window alert. So it's just going to pop back whatever the raw response is, which should be like a JSON status message. So I'm just going to call book seat. Okay. It's book seat a couple of times. It's asynchronous, which is always fun stuff. So let's refresh this. How many itineraries do I actually have booked? Oh, well, I'm on a lot of seats. Now, this is interesting. I'm sure a couple people cringed. I saw Beetle actually do it. When he saw that, when we made the low bid and it said holding seat, because the last thing you want to do when you're in a checkout procedure is have somebody else have a race condition and have somebody else come along and snipe the seat. And don't get me wrong, we'll get to race conditions in a minute. Those are fun too. But when he rejected our offer, they then released the seat. Well, these were
via a manual explicit call.
Yes, by a manual explicit web service call. So what happens if we just start calling book seat or hold seat and never actually call reserve or release seat? Well, we can perform denial of service attacks extremely easily. And these aren't your standard denial of service attacks where, you're doing a SYN flood or a Smurf attack or what have you. You're not flooding it with traffic, right? You could never DDoS Google. But you can DDoS Google Maps or you could DDoS Google Docs and Sheets by actually what we're calling a control logic DOS. We're going to go ahead and actually change the order that functions are called in, pass them invalid data. Maybe we'll do a race condition where we call this first function, and the second one, which is dependent on it, we'll let them both go at the same time. See what can happen.
There's all kinds of possibilities here. Anytime you have a resource allocated in one function and then freed in another that you're calling manually and explicitly, you have the possibility for this type of denial of service. Consider maybe opening a file handle in one method explicitly and then explicitly releasing it in the next. Again, easy just enough to call it and open it and hold it that way so that no one else can ever access that file. So very effective denial of service.
This is actually, I know maybe some of this sounds contrived, but again, this is all stuff we've seen in the wild multiple times in our pen tests and in looking at actual customer advice in these various books. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to start calling the hold seat. What trip was I booked on? I was booked on. Let's call that first one. So hold seat. And if you also think about this, right, this whole concept of we're going to allocate in one and get rid of in another, a lot of people probably are thinking that's really bad. All these web services should be atomic. But if the web services are being atomic, that kind of gets you away from what AJAX is supposed to do, which is break complex operations up, have the client actually be involved in a meaningful part of the application.
Right, and now
reduces feedback.
You have the user just sitting there again for long, potentially 30-second long operations. This helps you make mashups too, So
window alert, okay. It has a random number of, oh wait, there it is. All right, so error, available seats equals -1. So let's say even your developer was smart. We've now exhausted all of the seats. And in fact, if we do a search right here and go back, we'll see that all of the seats have been exhausted for the AirTran flight. Now, the interesting thing here is even if your database guy or even if your developer was smart and he wrote something and said, you know what, let me have a cleanup thing that after 30 seconds I'm going to go ahead and close that database handler. Now you're talking about however many outstanding flights there are. Let's say there are, 8 outstanding seats on the flight. I need to send, don't need the breakpoint. I need to send 8 requests to go ahead and grab those things and hold them. And then once every 30 seconds, as each one of those seats becomes available, I have to send one more HTTP transaction. Yeah, so here we see the AirTran flights has 0 seats available. So that is a ridiculously easy DOS. It's amazingly asymmetric, right? I got to send one HTTP request every 30 seconds, and you can't book a flight on a plane. How many millions of dollars will Expedia lose in a day if I do that? I'm not suggesting.
Hackervacations.com.
Yes, Hacker Vacations. Yes, we're talking about Hacker Vacations here, nothing else.
So let's at this point let's keep looking at the code and find out what we can do. I mean we've done some pretty serious damage so far. We can not pay for flights. We can basically DOS the plane. Let's see what else we can do.
So, an interesting thing here I just want to point out is that there's always seems to be this file called common.js. And in fact, right now, as you all can see, I'm on the itineraries page, right? This involves no user feedback. This is purely a informational server. Everything is actually processed on the server and it spits out the flights. It's not AJAXy in any way, shape, or form. But it's got a JS file with all of these random flights in it. It's got the functionality for doing flight searches. Our bidding page, which only does bidding, had references to flight search. I can do the make offers. So it's actually exposing the API, the entire API of the application, even when I'm on a page that doesn't use those parts of the API.
And this is not surprising because again, this is advice we got from other sources, which is to keep all your JavaScript in one large monolithic file. Well, it's actually, from a certain perspective, good advice. It's easy to maintain that way.
It caches once.
Yeah, exactly. So it's good for performance. If you need to make changes, you're making changes in one spot instead of multiple spots. So on the surface, it seems like good advice.
It also seems like they might be using a template. So if you use ASP.NET, master pages, if you're using PHP, Smarty or ITX. So if we actually examine the source of these two pages, we'll see that the head is almost identical. I've got this JS file. I'm including JSON.js for our transport. The location of where the style sheet is, the white space, everything is exactly the same on this. So what the developer probably did is created some type of template, and in the head, obviously, he referenced these JS files. So since we've been able to DOS the plane and go ahead and manipulate the control flow of this application, let's try to see if there are any other web services referenced in Common that are providing functionality for a part of an app that we haven't seen yet. So let's go ahead and start digging in way down here. Those look kind of funny looking. There's a JavaScript function here called crypt. We'll look at that in a minute. Something else you should never, ever do in JavaScript. Okay.
So we've got things we've seen here before. We've got
flight search.
Flight search and make offer, book seat, debit account, hold seat, release seat.
Miles club check.
I'm not sure we've seen that one. Admin.addUser. That's really interesting.
Well, I didn't see an admin page. Did you see an admin page?
No, I sure didn't. We could probably just randomly look for one. We
I'll
could
tell
do
you what,
like
let's try that.
A forceful browsing kind of thing.
I mean, I'm not trying one. I could use something, if I was going old school, I could do libwhisker, or I could use an excellent SPY Dynamics /HP product. But anyway, I could enumerate these things and try to find all these, try to find this admin web portal, which we see references to.
But why bother?
I know what web service it's talking to, right? Think about what we've seen on this site. We've seen that it uses AJAX. We see it's calling a method called doPost. So I think it's probably safe to say it's using HTTP post.
And everything we've seen it send so far has been JSON. And in fact, it says it uses JSON as the parameter name. So let's just try to call this. Now we don't know exactly what we're sending it, but we can send it just maybe an empty JSON array to start and see what we get back. Maybe it'll work and then we've won, or maybe it'll come back with an error and give us some more information as to how to proceed.
So let's go ahead. I'm going to fire up. And again, there's nothing honestly magical about spy tools. You can do this with Paros, Proxy, Fiddler, whatever floats your boat. So let's just throw Hacker Vacation in. And what was that?
I believe it was
AJAX calls add user.ash.
AJAX.
Oh, thank you. AJAX. We know that it was a get, we know that it was a post. And we know that it's probably taking JSON of some kind, but we're not sure. So I'm just going to put in
an empty array.
Empty JSON array. Y'all know what JSON is, by chance? It's a kind of a lightweight data transport, not quite as heavy as XML. Interestingly enough, JSON is actually a subscript of or a subset of JavaScript. And the way you eval JSON when it comes back into JavaScript makes for some interesting cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, especially if you're using prototype. So let's go ahead and send this sucker off, see what we get. And we get back 200 OK with can you all see that? With a nice verbose error message that says
missing username, missing name, missing password, and missing debug flag.
I don't know about you, but debug flag sounds like something that would be fun to mess with. So let's go ahead and put something in here. I'll just do, Eve is always good. Eve. And let's see if we can actually change anything that we're getting back here. Maybe that's just a generic bad formed. And we see the error message actually change. Now it's just saying we're missing a name, a password, debug flag. So let's go ahead with put in a real name. Now for password, it's interesting, right? I mean, we might just be getting this error message because we don't have the right number of parameters. We might start getting things about this isn't the right password strength. And because we're not actually accessing it through the admin portal, we're literally talking directly to the web service. We might miss knowing what basically the rules are for these inputs. So we're just going to try to guess.
But they are giving us nice verbose error messages, so that definitely helps us. But even if they weren't, we could get past this.
Eve's password is going to be unimaginably Eve123. And debug flag.
I think we should do debug. That sounds
yeah,
pretty.
True. Yes, let's do some debug. And again, I mean, I'm assuming this is going to add a user of some kind, but again, we're flying blind. But we found a reference to it. So let's go ahead and send, and we get invalid value for debug flag, which is interesting because we're on the right path. We don't want to try false. Let's try it in quotes.
Definitely try it in quotes.
What? Ah, all right, let's try 1. That sounds good. Send. Success equals true. Okay, so did we actually just create a user? I don't know. That would be kind of cool if we did. So let's go ahead, head back over here. Let's log out of Hello Spy. Log in as Eve. Eve123. Log in. Wow, that sure looks a whole lot different.
So apparently we added a user, and we've got extra things to do. We have a debug menu, toggle ads, set the date, load transactions.
Dump log sounds cool. And we see some information down here. We've got a load balancer, a big IP load balancer, some uptime.
And this is interesting too, a return to admin link. So apparently they're figuring we're an admin type user, and we're going to go back to the admin login page now.
But the weird thing is we didn't get here from an admin page. So that's a little odd. So let's check it out. And we're at an admin portal. And sure enough, it's located as site config index HTML. So we probably would not have guessed site config in maybe the 800 directories or whatever that we enumerated. And incidentally enough, we've got a null pointer exception or an object reference not set. Again, probably because we're not really an admin. We're not really supposed to have been here. We've got the app kind of in some weird unstable thing.
Now we can try to break into it at this point. But again, why would we bother? There's no reason for us to do this because everything we can do on this page, we can already do through the exposed API.
Exactly.
And even if we had managed to guess this page before, if we'd guessed site config, we would have had to try to brute our way in or inject our way in or whatever. And who knows whether that would have been successful or how long it would take. So the site people or the site developers did a really great job of locking down access to that page. That site config page was totally secure. We couldn't get into it. But everything that site page did was already exposed that we could just call from another site. So we just kind of snuck in a back door, if you will.
So the problem is that they're not actually putting validation functions or authorization, checking authentication or authorization on the actual web methods. What they expected is that the admin user would hit, admin.php, whatever. They'd already performed the operations there, and then there'd be Ajax and JavaScript on the admin portal, which is actually contacting these web services. And it's kind of this whole concept of, well, why would anyone ever use the app differently? I mean, this is the JavaScript I gave them. There is no JavaScript which makes a call to this web service. How could the app be used in this way?
Now
We've actually had developers say that to us.
Just like we saw before with the pricing attack, it comes down to calling things in a way that it wasn't intended, or things that may have been, when this was a traditional web application, when this wasn't Ajax, this was probably okay. There was no way just to directly call that method.
Right. We actually, we'll show you one that we actually got from a code test here. Where'd it go? So this is actually a real-world example. We found this about a year ago on one of our first Ajax assessments, where this is a web method.
Yeah, this is one of my all-time favorite real-world examples here. So we have a method called update password that takes a customer ID and a new password and just accepts that blindly. So, we missing anything here? Maybe an old password to confirm that you really are the person who knows the old password. When this was, okay, so bonus points for anyone else who can find other vulnerabilities in this code. SQL injection.
SQL injection.
Anything else? Cross-site scripting, exactly. So what we have here is a method that anyone can call directly